How do supply shocks affect short-run aggregate supply? Imagine an unexpected event suddenly changing how much stuff an economy can produce. That's what a supply shock does. It causes the short-run aggregate supply curve to shift. The short-run aggregate supply curve shows how much goods and services firms are willing and able to produce at different price levels when some input costs are fixed. When a supply shock hits, it can shake up the entire economy. A negative supply shock happens when something makes producing goods more difficult or expensive. Think of a sudden spike in oil prices, a natural disaster damaging factories, or a trade embargo blocking supplies. These events make it harder or more costly for firms to produce goods. As a result, the short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to the left. This means less is produced at each price level. The immediate effects are that output drops because firms cut back on production. Prices tend to rise because the reduced supply pushes prices higher, even if demand stays the same. This combination of higher prices and lower output can lead to a situation called stagflation, where inflation and stagnation happen at the same time. Unemployment usually goes up because firms need fewer workers when they produce less. On the other hand, positive supply shocks make things easier or cheaper for firms. For example, a technological breakthrough that improves manufacturing efficiency or an increase in the availability of raw materials shifts the short-run aggregate supply curve to the right. This means more goods and services can be produced at each price level. The effects are that output increases because production becomes more efficient. Prices tend to fall because the increased supply lowers costs and prices. This situation boosts economic growth and reduces unemployment in the short run. The size of these changes depends on how demand reacts. If demand is not very responsive to price changes, then prices will change more sharply with small shifts in supply. If demand is more flexible, then output will change more than prices. Supply shocks are important because they cause short-term fluctuations in output and inflation that are independent of demand. Policymakers need to consider these shocks because trying to boost demand during a negative supply shock might make inflation worse without fixing the real problem. For example, the oil crisis in 1973 caused a negative supply shock by sharply raising oil prices. This reduced output and increased inflation at the same time. Conversely, technological advances in manufacturing can create positive supply shocks, increasing output and lowering prices quickly. So, supply shocks are a key factor in understanding how the economy moves through different phases of business cycles and economic changes. They can cause sudden shifts in production and prices, shaping the overall economic landscape in the short run.